like you said, my name's Ryan Sullivan, and I farm with my dad, Mike, here in the front row. And I just graduated from Arkansas State 2015, I guess 2 years now. And Dad always makes a comment that whenever I came, he needed me to come back because he needed some new eyes on the farm. And so that's what I started doing, is trying to figure out different ways that we could do things and change things up a little bit. He was doing a fine job, but never hurts to try new things. The first thing I want to do is I want to get an idea of what we got in here. How many farmers are in here? Number one, raise your hand if you're a farmer. And then out of that group, how many people have tried row rice before? How many people have done row rice? Okay, so you kind of get a feel of what you're working with. I knew it was either going to be a bunch of people that had done it before or a bunch of people that had never heard of it before. So a little background about me is 2 years ago, I'd never heard of row rice before, and I came to this conference, and that's where I first heard about it. And so I said, well, why don't we try that? Wendell Menson, I think, is the one that talked about it. And
bring him up.
Well, good thing I got you in here, but you're the one that gave me the idea. Well, I guess the formal idea. My father-in-law had tried it before, so I knew about the idea a little bit before that. But I said, well, maybe we can try that, because levee gates and levees and all that manual labor is one of the struggles that we have on our farm. So I set out to try it. So we tried it this past year. Like I said, we farm in Burdett, Arkansas, and here's a little page of just a little bit about our farm, just to give you an idea of what we do. But I farm with my dad. He's a fourth generation farmer, and I'm a fifth generation farmer. We got 5,600 acres of rice and 7,400 acres of soybeans. All our soybeans we plant twin row on 38-inch beds. Most of our ground is precision level to grade on a tenth. We have 400 acres out of that's zero grade, but the rest is leveled on a tenth. We rotate the rice and the soybeans across all the acres. There's not very much rice behind rice that we have, and so every year we were having to do all this field work. It was just a tradition, and when you cut the rice, you got to knock the levees down. You got to work the ground, work the ruts out, and do all the things that you have always done to work all that ground. And so I just started. Whenever I heard Wendell's speech, it clicked that maybe there's a way we can do it without all that work. So we tried row rice this first year, and that's probably the most important thing you can see on this presentation is the word rookies. We learned as we went. It's a little video I put together of the row rice, but the sound don't have any sound. It doesn't really matter, but it's got something playing in the background. But that's one of the 80-acre fields of row rice that we tried. There's the levee field on that side right beside it. That was our comparison. But that's traditionally what we've always had is just. Yeah, she didn't know what to think about that drone. That's my duck dog, and so she didn't know what that thing was flying that she couldn't get. So there's the poly pipe going down the edge, and there was a dummy line because it's a half-mile long stretch. I'll talk about that, but that's the ease of cutting in the dry and not making ruts and crossing levees and all that is something that you can't really put a price on. All right. So I'll start out with just a few things of why we think it'll work for us. So like I was saying, we plant the soybeans on twin rows on 38-inch beds, and so the way it'll fit into our system is the last trip before that drill right there was a combine cutting the beans. The field beside it, my comparison field, after we cut the beans that fall, we ran a scratcher, a field cultivator, and a Kelly Diamond to smooth it out behind that to get it ready to plant rice. So there's already 2 trips that we've saved on this row rice field, and 0 trips across the field to plant that row rice right there.
Why you crossing the levees with drill?
Tried it up and down the beds, tried it straight. That's the way I was. That's the way somebody else told me to do it. I couldn't get enough down pressure in those middles, and the beds were too hard to where it wasn't. It was just dropping that seed on top of the ground in the middles, and so we tried it on an angle, and that's the way we've planted wheat before. Wheat beans is across on an angle for the same reason, and so that's what gave me the idea to do it on an angle, and I was able to get good down pressure in the middles, and it planted and covered up good in the middles by doing it at an angle like that.
You did say that nothing has been in that field after the combine?
The last trip across that field, the last thing across that field before this drill was the combine cutting the beans in the fall. So those are just stale, old soybean beds from the previous year. Completely no-till. So like I said, we plant on the old soybean beds. We don't have to tear down the levees. No getting tractors stuck tearing down levees, and also the work in the ground. No more putting up levees. In our kind of dirt, it's different across everywhere you go, but in our kind of dirt, you can't put up a good levee, a good strong levee, with less than 5 trips. It's just gumbo clods, and it takes that many times to get a good levee built. And so that's a big deal for us, is not having to do all those trips across the field when we're putting up levees, fixing to flood, and no more harvest in the mud. So this is a frequent thing in most normal rice fields with levees, where you can't get it to drain good and it just turns into a mud pit. So no more of that with the row rice. No more levee gates. No spills put in or checked or fixed. Less labor. So this is one of the guys that works for us. This is his son, and he's obviously having a blast with the checking levee gates, but most people don't quite enjoy it. So if we can cut that out, we're saving a lot of manual labor, a lot of hassle with fixing those things. So that's drilling across on the angle like that, and that's the rice coming up however long later. So has anybody else tried? I mean, you asked about planting on an angle. When do most of your guys plant on an angle, or?
We do both ways.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought you said. And probably depends on the kind of dirt of what kind of down pressure you can get.
The advantage I saw to planting with the rows, which you kind of waller out a spot where you know water's going to run down.
Yeah.
That's the reason I did it, just because when you got those dual wheels, you got 4 rows there, you know you're going to be able to push water.
Well, I could argue with that and say if you go on straight like that, it may all follow those ruts in some dirt. So in this particular dirt, and all the dirt that we tried this year, that was the best way to do it that I found. I know of some other people that after they plant, so we roll behind the drill with a flat roller, but there's some people that do the McFarland Hara behind it to try to cover up some of that seed in the middle if they do plant straight down the rows. And that picture's in the way of it. I don't even know what that says behind it, but that's just showing how we water down the middles. We poked a hole in every middle, and we run every acre we got on Delta Plastics pipe planter. And so we traditionally punch a hole in every other middle on the beans, but we changed it to every furrow for this row rice, and it worked out pretty good. This is an 80-acre field. It's a half-mile long, so we had to have a dummy line, as you can see there. But
How wide your road, Ryan?
38. And so as you can see, it wound up being really even, and that's the kind of dirt that this is the only kind of dirt that I can see it working in, is how quick that's wicking. If you can tell right there, it's already wicked all the way across that middle right there. And if it doesn't wick that good, then I don't know how you can do row rice very effectively. This picture is from the bottom end looking back up the slope. And so that's when we first put the flood on, and that shows you how far you on that 10th slope, how far you can push that water even when that rice is young. And that's not too deep of water down here. That's the water furrow right there. But even at that stage that the rice is in there, we're able to push it back 25% of the field. And when the rice gets big, it was 50% of the field was actually a flooded field.
What was your first herbicide application after you planted?
Right behind the drill, across every acre we have rice. What our traditional thing to do is Roundup and Command, 16 ounces of Command. And so we did that with this row rice too, trying to see if it would work the same. Didn't really know anything else to do. So we did that, and then about a week later, it was cold, so the rice still hadn't come up, so we put 2 ounces of Sharpen out as a pre-emerge to try to hold the pigweeds back. And so that's what we put out before the rice came up. And then we come back with a half pound of Facet and another 8 ounces of Command after the rice, before we flood or water in. This is one thing that I think Dr. Scott's going to be able to help us on. But like I said, what we tried to do to help the pigweed situation, which obviously in a flooded environment, traditional rice, you can just flood them out. That's what I've always been taught. If you got some pigweeds out there, you don't have enough water. Well, it's a different situation here because the top end of the field is just staying muddy, and so you can't flood out a pigweed in a muddy environment. It's just heaven for them. So we put out the 2 ounces of Sharpen, but then we got a 5-inch rain, and so the activity on the Sharpen, I'm not sure how much we actually got out of it. I think maybe we lost some of it, but so we had a few breakaways on the top ends of the field. We sprayed a sprayer boom's length around all the borders, which we do that with all our rice field, of Sharpen post-emerge, just an ounce of Sharpen around the borders to try to kill them. But I think that's something that's going to be if you do it on a big scale, like we're talking about doing this next year, we got to have another ammunition besides just Sharpen. We got to have something else to be able to get them or to keep them from coming up too. So hopefully he'll be able to help us on that. These are just a few more pictures, just showing the comparison. So this is the side inlet, multiple side inlet levee rice field. This is what every bit of rice we always have grown has been like. And the poly pipe runs down the side, and it's got multiple side inlet with Delta Plastic Pipe Planter program with the blue gates, putting the same amount of water in each paddy, and just a normal flood irrigation. But we've been implementing the AWD for the last couple of years across everything, and so with this field that I compared it to, it was an AWD field, so we're already not using as much water with it as what we did in a normal flood, continuous flood. And so that's what I compared the water usage to. This is the row rice field here, and as you can tell, there's a line straight through there. So that dark green on this side, light green little strip right there, the light green little strip is what the airplane didn't get whenever we added 100 pounds to the top third. So I just had to guess, tell the airplane. I probably didn't start at the beginning of that. I think I've got that on the slide, but we put all our fertilizer out up front, pre-flood. We put all the N out up front. So we've done that for the last few years across everything. Well, we did that on this row rice too. And we started seeing the need for some more fertilizer on the top third, where it's just staying wet. That's all it's doing. So we lost our nitrogen. So I called the airplane, and we got 100 pounds put on the top third. So that's the line that you can see there. That we added some more fertilizer, but that middle, right, the other side of the dark line, that's how far the water's flooded. That's how far it's pushed back. So it's a normal flood field on that low end of that everything on that other side of that dark line. That's just a normal flooded rice field.
How far do you think your water come up on that field compared to where that line's at?
This stage of the rice, once it finished growing, we were able to push it to what I would say the halfway point. So that's about where that dark line is, right through there. We were able to push that water. That water line was right up through there, and so the bottom third of the field was a continuous flood, and then the middle was basically AWD, and the top was just keeping it wet. And so if I had to do this again, which is a good thing about farming, you got another year. So next year I'll be able to do it different. I think this year what we're going to do is, like I said, on all the other rice that we do, we put all the in-out pre-flood. And so with our fertilized rigs, we've got our own fertilized rigs, and we can plug in a prescription just like any of the P&K applications or anything, but we can plug in a prescription, and it'll be fairly simple to do. Every one of the row rice fields, we can draw, whether you want to split it in half or whether you want to split it into thirds, you can draw a prescription in on every one of the fields, and we'll just put it all out. Why not go ahead and put it all out at the bottom third, and then just not waste our money and put it all out on the top where we know we're going to lose it. And we're going to plan on coming back and spoon feeding that top third.
By looking at that, would you do the half of it?
I don't know.
Looks like
You tell me.
Go about half.
Yeah, you tell
Instead
me.
of a third.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I suggest y'all do, but as I see this more and more acres I do, that line might be a little farther south than what down slope. Maybe I have to do more according to your.
Yeah, I'd say half.
You have yield maps?
Yeah, I don't have them on. Don't have them on here, but I looked at them. That's whenever I was in Lee Atwell's presentation earlier, I was sitting there and he was showing the yield maps of some of their studies and stuff, and I thought, why don't I have a yield map in there? So I looked on my computer, but you can't. We cut down the rows. We cut at a slight angle down the rows, and I honestly, on our yield maps, I can't tell any difference. Really? And so that's why I didn't even go to the trouble to change in the presentation and add it in here, because you could not tell an obvious difference. There was not an obvious difference on that combine going straight down that slope. Not enough to even change my presentation. The reason is because we added 100 pounds on that top end. But the problem is we wasted it on the front end, so we don't need to put it all out on the top end at the beginning, or we're just throwing it away. We know we're gonna lose it. So this is one of the best parts about this whole deal is being able to cut in the dry. You're cutting, and it's just like cutting beans. It's dry. The ground has had time to dry up, firm up. There's no mud. And luckily this year it was pretty dry, and so we were able to not even rut it up. So if we would have wanted to, we could have just probably burnt that straw off and planted beans this next year with it. Instead, whenever we got it burned off, I decided to go on and refreshen them up. So we ran one hipper trip behind the Kelly, behind the burn, and we just refreshed those beds up a little bit more, and we're going to plant beans right on that this year. So in 2 years, there's only been a Kelly Diamond run across it and a hipper run across it. That's the only trips across this field in 2 years. This is some of Dr. Trent Roberts' work here. He had in that field that's in that drone shot right there, he had a nitrogen trial, and he had all the little small plot different rates of nitrogen in there. You're not in here, are you, Dr. Trent? Not in here. I'll get him to talk on it in a minute, but you can tell what it is. But he's got the N rate over here, and he's got he had one section of his study in the bottom end, which is just a normal rice field. It's a flooded environment, which is right here, and then he had the non-flooded end, which was just staying muddy, just like a AWD field or even less, just staying muddy on the top end is what these are. And so that just shows you across there what, according to the N rates, what are the yields on, and the differences between, obviously you're losing some over here on this top end. So wish he was in here to explain more of what he had a bunch of slides. I just added this one in here to give you a little idea. So this is what I put together as far as so-called budget comparison on these two fields. It does not have every cost for each field. It does not have exact. It doesn't have every cost for the field, but what it has is it has every cost that's going to be different from row rice to non-row rice, to a regular flooded rice field to a row rice field. What are your differences going to be? And that's what I put in here, so that you can really tell the difference between the the row rice field and the regular flooded field next to it. Both about the same size fields. So seed costs, we're not going to plant any different rate of seed. Same 25 pounds of Rice Tech 753. The nitrogen, like I said, we put all the N up front on both fields, and according to Instar, it's what we instarred every one of our fields this year. It recommended that we put 288 pounds on each field, and so that's what we did to start out, and then figuring in that other 100 pounds and paying the airplane, that's what it wound up being right there. And that's got the airplane cost in there too, to pay him to put that 100 pounds on the top end. The number of spray trips, 3 on this field, 4 on this one. The only difference on the row rice field is, like I said, we put that 2 ounces of sharpen out as a pre-emerge. The number of tillage trips, 2015, that's going into rice from beans. So on the non-row rice field, we had to knock down those beds. So it took 2 trips across the field to knock down those old soybean beds to get it flat for levee rice. Number of tillage trips in 2016, which is after we cut this row rice. On the levee field, we had to knock down the levees, and we had to killie the straw down, and then we had 2 disking trips and a hipper trip and a roller trip to get that field ready to plant beans. And on the row rice field, all we had to do was killie the straw down, burn it, and then run a hipper or roller cone is what we got this year that works wonders. If you haven't ever seen one, you need to look it up. But it'll pull the bed up through a lot of straw that where a regular hipper wouldn't, and then a roller trip. And so there's, just look at the savings on the amount of trips across the field just right there. The number of levee building trips, obviously we had no levees in the row rice field, and it took us 6 times per levee in that other field. And the irrigation is probably, if you know a whole lot about it, how much water it takes to water rice, that's probably pretty alarming. We didn't have much assistance from rain this year. I think Lee said in his, he said this wasn't a good year to study it because we had a lot of rain, and I'm thinking, well, we didn't have much assistance at all watering rice this summer. It was basically all pumping. And so we got a good test. We got the extreme test of having to pump every bit of it. So with the flooded AWD field beside it with levees, we used 36 acre inches, and in the row rice field we used 40 acre inches. Not that big of a substantial difference. And I think we probably used too much water. We just watered whenever it started looking dry. We started feeling like we needed to water. We had soil moisture meters, but we didn't use them for management this first year, where they just used them for research. So I think that we can use less water than that. I think we can potentially, if it's managed perfectly, we can use less water than what it is to flood a field. So there's your total cost for each field that matter for the difference between row rice, and there's the yield for each field. This is the regular flooded levee field, and this is the row rice field. And I just figured it on $5 rice, dream big. And and there's your net revenue for both fields.
Ryan, is that 753 or
753. Yeah, that's one thing that we haven't dove into yet is Clearfield. We haven't had to use Clearfield because of beans and rice rotation, and so we haven't even used the Clearfield bullet yet. So the summary, the take-home message for me has been this first year, and you can form your own opinion, is that row rice field had a net revenue increase of $26.56. Will it always? I don't know. Was I trying to improve our net revenue of that field? No. The reason I tried row rice because I wanted something easier. I wanted to use less knucklehead farmhands. I wanted less levee gates to put in.
I thought you said you wanted my help.
We're gonna be out of business if we don't have to use levee gates.
Might be
So
what
that-
he was talking about.
So that's the reason I wanted to try it. I just wanted to try to number one, see if it could work for us. And laborers are by far our biggest issue. I tell Dad all the time, but I went to college to get an ag business degree, but I should have went to get a psychology degree. Is what I should have got, because that's by far our biggest struggle, is dealing with the guys that we get to work on our farm. And so if I can eliminate any of those kind of people to have to pick up throughout the year to put levee gates in or to pull them out, it's a lot less stress. So that was the reason I did it. I didn't try to increase revenue, but what do you know, it actually did. So less manual labor, less knucklehead farm help. Win-win for me. Less trips across the field, that's time and money saved. It's hard to resist that. Obviously on this scale that we tried it this year, it didn't affect, you couldn't see the effect of it, but if you spread this out and have a couple thousand acres of it, I could see a major difference in your management. Being able to manage row rice a whole lot easier than what you can manage regular levee rice. Pigweeds can put a hurt on us if we don't have the right program in place, and so we saw that with just the few that we let get away this year and had to pull. And I forgot to make a comment about that pigweed that we pulled. So we pulled that pigweed just on the top end of that field, just one scarce one that got away, and we pulled it and threw it down in the field. Well, it grew new roots straight down, laying on its side. It grew new roots and was fixing to turn straight back up and start growing back up. So, message is don't throw a live pigweed down in the rice field, or it'll keep growing again. And the takeaway on the water situation was 36 to 40 acre inches on that field right there with little to no rainfall to help. Gave us a pretty good idea that we can use roughly the same amount of water as a side inlet AWD field, and certainly less than a cascade flood. I don't have that slide in here, but we had one comparison. We had 160 acres, 4 different 40 acre fields, and Dr. Reba did a study on the water that we use there, and I'm thinking, what was it, like 15 more acre inches on the cascade flood than even the row rice. So if you're just watering rice the old-fashioned way, dumping it out of the riser and cascading it all the way down, you need to look at some new ways to be able to save water. And so we may not always use less water with row rice, and that's not the intention of it, but we're certainly always going to use less water than just cascading it down and not using multiple side inlet. So the final take home is we don't know what to think about it yet, but we liked it enough to where we're going to try more of it. So we're going to have about 800 acres this year, spread out a field on each farm type situation, to try it again and see what we can do with it this year. So I'll open it up to questions. I'd love some feedback.
What was your herbicide management program?
16 ounces of command and a quarter Roundup behind the drill, right behind the drill, and then 2 ounces of Sharpen about a week later after that, before the rice came up as a pre-emerge, and then we came back with 8 more ounces of command and a half pound of Facet.
Did you notice, since you had flood on one side and kind of gradient up to just muddy on the other. Did you notice a difference in like grass response and stuff over the varying water level? Or did you?
No, we didn't have any grass problems. We had some mare's tail, and that's where Dr. Scott came in to help us with that. And did you have the pictures of the mare's tail getting burned by the facet?
I did not.
We were
I saw
concerned.
them, but I don't have them.
Well, I don't have them on here
You had
either.
three residual herbicides on the field. Command, Facet, and Sharpwood.
And but that was one concern that we did have throughout the season, which prompted a call to him. Was we had some mare's tail that didn't look like it was going to die from that facet, and it's in a normal flooded field, it'll go on and die because it's getting flooded out. But we were concerned, but it did wind up going ahead and dying.
What about Brown?
Sharpen didn't do it any favors.
Yeah, it probably helped a little bit.
What about Brown?
Prowl's a good option. Up in this geography, there's a good possibility that the pigweed are prowl friendly. And the other challenge that they have with pigweeds, and Ryan didn't mention it, but they are in a county that's where you can't use 2,4-D currently. We're hoping Dow maybe gives us a reason to change that one of these days with that new 2,4-D.
Ryan, could you have saved a trip by putting your sharpen in with your Roundup and Command?
I think so.
And
I think-
saved your trip, because you
Yeah.
said you went a week later.
Yeah, because we didn't put that wasn't in our beginning plan. We added that
More
in.
aggressive, but
We learned as we went.
I loved your pre-emergence herbicide program, regardless of what the problems were, mare's tail I love starting off that way.
Did y'all do it with the ground rig, spray everything?
Well, that's one major thing that we try to do with farming rice is the only time an airplane ever, if everything goes right across our rice fields, the only time an airplane ever goes across is spraying stink bugs or a late fungicide application. Other than that, we run all our fertilizers with our ground rigs, and we spray everything with the ground rigs too. And so we don't have to use airplane anymore now just for row rice. And so that's why we're going to try to keep from it. But I think we're going to always have to, with that top third, spreading some more fertilizer.
You never did say your soil type, it's Sharky clay, right?
Yeah, it's heavy gumbo. That good field was one of the fields that we tried it on was a more loamy cotton dirt with a big tall round bed. Still an old soybean bed, but it didn't wash down because it's such different dirt, and it doesn't wick as good. And that yield difference was a little bit bigger margin on that cotton dirt. So I basically took from that we just need to stick to the gumbo beds, the gumbo farms.
So, Ryan, y'all don't have a salt problem. I'm just curious.
Was your herbicide the same on the side inlet as the row rice?
Everything except that 2 ounces of sharpen. We didn't have to use the 2 ounces of sharpen, or didn't feel like we did because we.
I just wondered because some guys around my location have tried this and they've had more trips with herbicides with the row rice than they did with the
Yeah.
row rice.
Well, we did have one more trip with the row rice, but like he said, we didn't have to. We could have put that, if we would have planned ahead, we could have put that 2 ounces of sharpen in with the Roundup and Command. So with that program, you can not have any more trips. But the thing about the more spraying trips, you may have more spraying trips, you may have a little bit more herbicide costs, but with the saving the tillage trips, that's where you make up your difference.
How much falls in those fields? What do you think is the limited amount of slope you can have?
Most everything we have is on a 10th. Some of it's on a 10th and a half. We're going to have a lot to try on 10th and a half this next year. Wendell, what are y'all's on slopes that y'all put it on?
Flatter the better.
Yeah, that's
You know,
what I think.
You're gonna set yourself up to fail if you try that 10th and a half a lot, unless, the flatter slope, the slower the water, the smaller the hose.
So that's whenever I first heard about row rice, there was some people trying it on maybe like in the Grand Prairie where they have a bunch of curvy levees and a real steep slope. And so that's what the initial thing to try it on was. And I said, Dad, why can't we try row rice? He said, we got perfectly flat fields that we can put straight levees in. Why you want to mess that up and put row rice? So, so then I heard, so then I heard Wendell say that you need flatter the better, and I said, well, we're gonna make it work in because we got flat, and so I think it works pretty good with a 10th because that's a half-mile long rows, and we were able to push it back a half of the field.
Your
So
water usage looked pretty much comparable. What did it feel like turning that row rice on every 2 or 3 days?
between 3 and 5 days is what her. She had a flow meter on both fields in every spot that we compared, and it was about every 3 to 5 days. What it wound up showing. But we just had an old guy that's been working with Dad for 30 years, turning the well on and off, and so he just used his eye. So that's why I say, I think with soil moisture meters, we can seriously improve that and be even less.
But at no point during the season did the soil moisture get, it probably got maybe 8 to 10% below saturation, but it didn't bottom out at all. Whereas in the ultra wetting and drying, it went down to about 30 to 40% of saturation at that early stage. So in the row rest, we were able to sustain the moisture in that field consistently.
If you wouldn't have worn your nice shoes out there at any point, you know, you didn't get that far in the year, did it?
No.
On your half a pound of facet pre-flood, what was your weed pressure like at that time?
That half pound comes out after emergence, post emergence.
Oh, okay. What will you, how do your residuals hold up is what I'm trying to ask.
Pretty good, but I think we're starting to see some barnyard grass resistance. What do you say?
We've been using Facet, the same program he's talking about, for several years, and we're saving that Clearfield bullet, and I guess.
Keep saving.
Okay. But so far, as long as the Facet gets activated, it's worked great.
But y'all were mostly, if I remember right, that was an overlapping residual.
Yep.
I think I talked to Greg or somebody at that time. There wasn't a lot up at the time that went out, right?
Which one?
Grass. This is the post shot.
No, I guess not. They're-
He wouldn't do, he didn't have too many escapes. It was pretty.
We're still pretty
First
early, I
shot
guess.
command was still holding, and then we
Yeah,
overlaid.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We got it activated, and it carried us all the way to flood.
And you have some options left too, so, especially for barnyard.
They have a lot of options
Yeah,
left in
yeah.
there on this farm.
Rice bowl.
Any other questions, or we're gonna let the weed guy talk?
We enjoyed the presentation.
Yeah.